And we're off to this story next. Following the recent Africa Peace Mission, we are now today joined by the Russian ambassador to South Africa, Ilya Rogachev, to give a better perspective on the mission. Ambassador, good morning and thank you so much for making time for us. So since that meeting that took place between your president as well as the African leaders and the African governments that were represented, what happens now to that 10-point plan or proposal?
Well, on the substance, we can only speculate, but I can tell you that, to the best of my knowledge, the participants of the initiative of the mission intend to visit both countries again, and in particular, as to the Russian Federation, the talks would be carried on on the margins of the second Russia-Africa summit, which is to take place in St. Petersburg later in July.
And during that meeting, would Russia also be giving feedback to these African heads of state and government as well on how far, if perhaps at all, it looked at into this 10 proposal plan and how far it was able to meet some of the proposals, or perhaps just give an update?
Well, I think that the exchange of views, the exchange of opinions has already begun, as our president commented in details on some of the topics raised by the members of the African mediation mission. And so the work is on. And also, to the best of my knowledge, the plan is sort of a preliminary outlay of how Africans view this situation and how they would like to approach it. Probably it will be discussed point by point. Probably not. I don't know. We cannot know that.
Yeah. And Ambassador, let's now go back to the meeting itself and, of course, the proposal. What does Russia make of that proposal? And the President Vladimir Putin had said that it is misguided, although the South African president had said that this is an African perspective.
Well, misguided. It is a word taken out of context, because in general we welcome this initiative. We respect the declared goals behind it, and you could see that Russian president greeted cordially all the participants, the presidents that came to St. Petersburg, including President Ramaphosa and other African VIPs who were present there. So we're happy. We take it as a manifestation of a very positive, of a friendly attitude towards the Russian Federation when friends wish to offer good services to a friend. It's not misguided, doesn't relate to the whole of the initiative by no means. But some of the points made during the meeting, yes, they produced such an impression on the Russian audience, in particular about grain and fertilizers and energy supplies to the continent. Yeah. Please, let's not support this Western mainstream media narrative that Russia is a culprit, that the special military operation in Ukraine caused it. Of course not. You can remember that energy markets became quite jittery much prior to the special military operation. It started happening in Europe in particular in the fall of 2021. So special military operation in Ukraine has nothing to do with it. As for the grain and fertilizer deliveries, we can tell you that according to the Black Sea agreement, the grain deal, due to the implementation of the Russian part, some 30 million tons of Ukrainian grain has been exported during that period. But only 3% of it went to the countries that are really in need of it. And the rest went to the markets of wealthy countries, mostly Europe and others. So this is just a smoke screen for the West to keep Russian grain out from the world markets and to saturate their markets with cheap Ukrainian grain. And well, so some others, perhaps, like the point that calls on the return of the children, since there are no Russian children in Ukraine. Apparently, it is addressed to the Russian Federation plus. But this is really a misguided part of the initiative, because, well, guess what country individually has harbored most of the Ukrainian refugees? It's not Poland, it's not Germany, it's Russia. We have more than 3 million Ukrainian refugees, and we would have many more of them, if they would have been allowed to travel to the east, to evacuate to the east from the country. But they were forced to go to the west, and now many of them are without travel documents, and they cannot cross from Poland into Russia and Belarus. So of these more than 3 million refugees, 750,000 approximately are children. And we do not detain any kids that would like to reunite with their families if they know where their families are, or where if their families are looking for them. And many of such families were reunited. The kids were evacuated from the dangerous zones where hostilities were taking place, and they are harbored in the kids' sanatoriums and summer camps. Most of them are of high class and very prestigious among Russians. Many people would like to send their kids to these places, so that they could continue education during the school year, and now they are resting there. So in this part, it is misconstrued, we think. But otherwise, again, we respect very much the initiative, the idea, and the people implementing it, and we take it as a sign, as a manifestation of a good attitude between our countries.
So where are the children right now, Ambassador? Because that's one of the calls that came out of the 10-point proposal as well, that the children must be returned to Ukraine. Where are they?
What children are you referring to? Please specify.
Well, we're speaking here about the children in relation to the Hague charge against Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, that there were children that were abducted from Ukraine. And that's the charge that has been laid against the president. And this was one, as I just said now again, as part of the 10-point plan proposal by the African leaders, was that the children should be returned. President Putin had said that actually he was assisting those children. So where are the children?
There are no children that are detained forcefully, that are forcefully separated with their Ukrainian families, and that are forcefully detained in the territory of the Russian Federation. There are children that were evacuated from the war zone. And my country is doing everything it can to make their lives easier. And when families would like to reunite, when there are families, they are reunited. And they are kept in the best children's facilities, as I just told you, that we have actually in this part of the country. As to the charges laid by the ICC, they are completely fabricated. Those are fake story, so it shouldn't be treated seriously.
Okay, so you wouldn't be able to share, Ambassador, where the children are, or whether Russia will be handing over those children back to Ukraine?
Well, give me names, please, of the children you're referring to, and we will do our best to find them and to answer your question.
Sure, you just said that you have the children in a place which is safe, so those are the children that we are speaking about. Is there any plans to hand the children back to Ukraine?
not to the state, but to their families.
To their families. And the families haven't reached out to the Russian Federation as yet?
Sorry?
I'm saying
The
that
families?
the families haven't reached out to the Russian Federation as yet to have the children being handed over to them.
Those who have been reunited.
Those who have been reunited. Okay, and just a final one, Ambassador, as well, is, so this war has now been going on, as you've been saying as well, that back in 2021 already, this has been something that has been ongoing. The President Putin had spoken about the demilitarization of Ukraine as well as the denazification of Ukraine. But what's the end goal of this war? What is it that Russia is trying to achieve here?
Well, the goals of the special military operation in Ukraine are pretty limited, and this is what we heard yet again from our president, and that I am going to repeat right now. It's denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine. You see that the problem is not on the Russian side. We were pretty ready to negotiate, and we were just that far from achieving an agreement with Ukrainian delegation late in March, early in April last year. And the text of the agreement was already initialed by the head of the Ukrainian negotiating team. But then, all of a sudden, after having some fruitful negotiation session in the morning, in the afternoon, Ukrainian delegation has simply left Istanbul. That all happened in Turkey, in Istanbul. Yeah. With the mediation of the Turkish side. Then, as you can remember, on the 2nd of April, I think, if my recollection is good, the then UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson appeared in Kiev and apparently explained to the Ukrainian side why they should not be negotiating with Russia. Yeah. Since then, one very remarkable event took place, and that is that in September last year, President Zelensky issued a decree which prohibits Ukrainian officials to negotiate with the Russian officials. So this is a task for the African mediation mission to overcome these obstacles, the obstacles on that side, because apparently those who finance, who cover the Kiev regime, they do not want us to live in peace, and they just made a spearhead of Ukraine in their attempts to, as you could hear again many times, different VIPs on the Western side saying that Russia should be defeated on the battlefield, Russia should be handed a strategic defeat, and so on and so forth. The purpose is to harm Russia as much as possible. And we regret very much that our neighbors accepted such a role, and it all leads only to the protraction of the conflict. Yeah.
A final one, Ambassador. A part of the plan as well is a de-escalation of hostilities. Do you think that that is possible at all, considering that there is a possibility that NATO could be supplying Ukraine with those F-16 fighter jets, and that President Putin had said that the President Putin had said that the jets, if they were to be deployed at bases outside of Ukraine to be used in hostilities, this country, speaking now about Russia, would have to consider where and how to destroy those weapons. Is a de-escalation really possible, considering the possibility of the F-16 jets being made available to Ukraine?
I would begin answering this question by pointing out that right now we're in the midst of Ukrainian so-called spring counteroffensive, which began in June, effectively. But I am not certain that, again, on the other side, they would agree to de-escalate when they have been preparing for this offensive for several months. They have been amassing troops that were trained in the Western countries, so relatively recently, some 60,000 of reinforcements trained according to NATO standards in NATO countries by NATO instructors, have arrived to the front. Whether it's a good time for them to escalate, I'm not certain. As to the F-16s, well, we have seen the West, the countries, it's more than NATO actually. Some 50 countries now provide military and including non-lethal assistance to Ukraine. We have seen them crossing all the red lines that they have drawn themselves, beginning with the promise not to supply lethal arms, then they started doing that. Not to supply long-range artillery, but they started doing that as well. Not to supply heavy equipment like heavy tanks, Abrams, Leopards, Challengers, British Challengers, and so on. They're doing that. They started supplying pretty modern air defense systems like Patriot. So all these lines have been crossed one after another. And we do not know where they will stop and when they will start rationally thinking in the interests of their countries and their people.
Yeah.
So I personally do not know when this can happen.
Yeah, and in Article 5 of NATO, do you think that would be activated at all, where there's a full-blown war between Russia as well as NATO member countries?
I hope that will not happen, finally Western European, first of all, elites will start thinking and become guided by the best interests of their peoples and their countries, not in the interests of some globalist financial elites. So we would all happily avoid this situation.
Okay.
But if they do not, then we will be ready to fight back.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. That is the Russian ambassador to South Africa, that is Ambassador Ilya Rogachev, on the outcomes of that meeting between the African heads of state as well as representatives of various African countries who met with President Vladimir Putin as well as President Zelensky of Ukraine.